I want to catch up with the Executive Director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute now, Peter Jennings. Peter, good to talk to you again. I want to talk to you about China primarily, but first up, Joe Biden and this stilted, staged, managed presidency. How do you think he's going, and particularly when it comes to the pandemic response?
Look, on content, Chris, I think he's been pretty good. He's hit the ground running with a lot of policy, not all of which I agree with, but one can't deny that the White House has been busy. He's always been a bit of a stilted performer media-wise, and for me, the analogy with Ronald Reagan is kind of irresistible here. I can see Biden being a kind of a grandfatherly presider over a cabinet of high performers that's supposed to work, but he's not fast when it comes to dealing with questions. And I think that's why, as you've said, we've not seen a press conference from him yet. That's not his strength. And so he's probably going to resist having very many of those for as long as he's president.
Not one, though, not one press conference. You mentioned a comparison with Ronald Reagan, but maybe Ronald Reagan at the end of his second term when things were getting a bit cloudy. But Ronald Reagan was known as the great communicator, certainly through all of his first term.
Yeah, no one could call Biden that. I mean, his speech delivery is slurred, but you know there's something to be said for a president that's actually capable of reading statements off an auto cue, as long as he agrees with it and understands what he's saying. So I think we've got to let Biden be Biden. This is how he's going to be, and quick on his feet in terms of dealing with the press. Well, he wasn't as vice president, and he probably won't be now as president.
Look, I think you're right. As long as he endorses and understands and is clear about what he's actually saying, sticking to script is pretty important, especially when he's dealing with foreign policy issues. Donald Trump's biggest problem was straying way off script. So let's have a look at foreign policy issues. And this leaders' meeting is going to happen virtually on the weekend. The first time that the quadrilateral is meeting at a leaders' level. That's India, Japan, Australia and the US. 4 major democracies in the East Asian hemisphere, obviously getting together in such a dramatic way to put pressure on China.
This is a very welcome development, Chris, and when the leaders of the 4 of the most significant world's democracies get together, that in itself is a significant development. You know, the Quad was something that a decade or more ago we were not even prepared as Australia to publicly endorse, out of concerns for how China would react to that. And we've come so far in terms of a deterioration of our strategic circumstances that now we understand that democracies have to work together. So of the 4 leaders that will be talking tomorrow morning, I think the one that should be happiest is Scott Morrison, because at last we have a sense that it's not just Australia in a bilateral fight with China. It's actually the democracies beginning to say to China, a lot of their behaviour is completely unacceptable. So I'm delighted at this development, and I hope that we will now see more things happening which start to put flesh to the bones of the Quad. We need to see more practical military cooperation, for example.
Yeah, I was around...
overall, good development.
Yeah, sorry, I was around as Chief of Staff to Foreign Minister Alexander Downer when this was first raised. I think Japan was pushing it early. As you say, as Australia, we were very wary about it because of how it might upset China in particular. India, I think, were tentative about it as well. It's gone through a process. The dynamics of the region have changed. And it now looks like a very, very good grouping for those reasons you've outlined. And I think in particular because it pulls India into our orbit and the orbit of the US and Japan as well.
I agree. India's come quite a long way in terms of its foreign policy thinking under Modi. They're still the most cautious of the 4, Chris. I think they're always going to be the one that's most wary of being sort of enmeshed in an American plot, as some might see it in New Delhi too.
Sure, they're virtually the leaders of the non-aligned nations, aren't they?
Yes. So Australia, Japan, the US, I think that will be the engine.
Yep.
But the more we can keep India, part of that, as a democracy of well over 1 billion people, the better. And I think what gets India to the table, of course, is that they've had their own bad experience with China in the Himalayas on the line of control in the last few months with some pretty ugly fistfights. And so India realises it's got a strategic problem too. And that means it'll overcome its traditional non-aligned perspective and I think come to the view that it's got to be able to work with the US, Japan and us. And the more they can do that, the more we can collectively pressure China into hopefully better behaviour.
Yeah, well, speaking of that better behaviour, it seems to have reacted with some fairly obvious sabre rattling in the last 48 hours. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, we've had angry statements from the embassy here. We've had angry statements from the Foreign Affairs Ministry, all of which suggest to me, Chris, that this wolf warrior diplomacy, this sort of rather nasty, belligerent face of China that we've been seeing for almost a year now, is going to continue. The trick is to try and sort of separate the rhetoric from the reality to see if there is anything underneath that. So, for example, I believe China rather felt that it had overstepped the mark in the line of control in its conflicts with India and was actually looking for ways to back down. And really the moral of that story is that we've all got to be strong-minded when it comes to dealing with Beijing. If we let them browbeat us, that China is always opportunistically going to take another step towards its objectives. If we can collectively push back, there's more chance that China will moderate its behaviour, maybe not its language, but moderate its behaviour.
Well, it's all happening on the weekend. Let's hope Joe Biden can fire up and be robust in his engagement with Xi Jinping. With the other three nations.
Be good to see, Chris. Thanks.
Thank you. Peter Jennings there from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Xi Jinping and China will be watching that quadrilateral dialogue from afar with a great interest.